Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. Today we're going to recap yesterday's Monday Night Football game between the Bengals and the Steelers. We're going to go and pick Game 2 of the WNBA Finals. We'll pick the wildcard game in the National League. My power rankings for Week 5, as well as guess the lines, and my best bet of the day. Okay. We're going to start, like I said, Monday Night Football. Steelers get their first win of the year, 27-3. Great all-around performance by them, especially their defense. Mason Rudolph had some nice plays in this game. He had 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. Andy Dalton, typical terrible Andy Dalton in primetime. 21 of 37, 171 yards and an interception. I told everybody to not bet the Bengals because of Andy Dalton in primetime, and that statement remains to be true, especially when Dalton's on the road. If Dalton's at home against a bad team, then maybe I'd consider it, but no. Dalton in primetime is an auto bet against. I think it's the number one auto bet against in the NFL, and they'll probably have one more primetime game this year. I think it's on Thursday Night Football, probably against the Browns, or maybe a Monday night game against somebody. I don't know who, but I know they have one more primetime game left on their schedule, and I can't wait to bet against Dalton in primetime again, even if the game might end up being in Cincinnati. Jalen Samuels had, in my opinion, a career game. This was like his little breakout game. 10 carries for 26 yards and 8 receptions for 57 yards. This guy could be like their mini version of Alvin Kamara. James Conner had a breakthrough game. 10 carries for 42 yards and 8 receptions for 83 yards. So they use Connor a lot in the passing game. And even Jalen Samuels threw 3 passes and completed them all for 31 yards. So Jalen Samuels is their nice little wild card piece that they got going for them. And now the Steelers host the Ravens on Sunday, so that's going to be very interesting. And that's suddenly like a very watchable game with how good the Steelers look. Granted, it was against a bad team. And the Ravens, 2-game losing streak. So a team that's under a little pressure in my mind in Baltimore. And then obviously Cincinnati's winless. They have a chance to get their first window next week when they host Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, who are also winless. So somebody's going to get their first win next week in Cincinnati. Okay. Game 2 of the WNBA Finals is tonight between the Mystics and the Sun, 8 o'clock, ESPN. Ryan Ruocco, Rebecca Lawson on the call. Mystics obviously won Game 1. I said before the series that I thought that Washington would win in 4 games and the Sun would win Game 3 at home. I'm going to stick to that proposition. So give me Elena Delle Donne and Christy Tolliver and company to go up 2-0 in this series. I think this game will be competitive just like Sunday's game was. I think Alyssa Thomas and Jaquel Jones will keep the Sun relevant in this game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored because both these teams can score the basketball a lot. So I would bet the over in tonight's game. I don't know what the spread is. I would have to check FanDuel for that. I would say Mystics by 7 or something like that. And I would probably take the points, actually, although the Mystics will probably win the game. So give me the Mystics to go up 2-0 in the WNBA Finals. Now I'm going to pick the National League wildcard game. Big game, for sure. Season's on the line for the Milwaukee Brewers and the Washington Nationals. 8 o'clock, TBS. I think on the call will be Brian Anderson and Ron Darling. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to check right now to see. Maybe Dennis Eckersley's in there as well. So again, the game will be called by Ernie Johnson, Ron Darling, and Jeff Francoeur. Interesting. So it's good to see Ernie Johnson on the call in baseball playoffs again, because I know Brian Anderson's been on the call these for the last couple of years. Oh, I'm such a dumbass. Brian Anderson's not on the call this game because he's the voice of the Brewers. I completely forgot about that. So that's why it's Ernie Johnson. Okay, so that makes a ton of sense why Brian Anderson's not doing this game. Although Brian Anderson has supplanted Ernie Johnson as the lead TBS baseball voice, perhaps because Brian Anderson did do that Yankee series last year with Ron Darling. So, Yankees, Red Sox. So, and then obviously the Astros, Red Sox too in the next round. So, Ernie Johnson calling this game probably because he can't put Anderson on the Brewers game. Meanwhile, Fox last year had Joe Davis calling Braves-Dodgers. Joe Davis will probably call Twins-Yankees, and Kenny Albert will probably have Astros in the wild card winner. And then obviously tomorrow night, Matt Vassurgeon, A-Rod, Jess Mendoza, Buster. So yeah, I'm right. It looks like for Kenny Albert, AJ Przinsky, and David Cone for Astros Athletics, and then Joe Davis, John Smoltz, Ken Rosenthal, and Tom Verducci for the Yankees series. So you knew the better announcing crew would be on the Yankees because Fox always does that because they're the sexy team and the big market team. So you obviously have the better announcers on the more marquee team, big market team, and then Kenny Albert, obviously for the other series. Kenny Albert on the Yankees series would have been a little strange, wouldn't it? Because he's obviously a New York announcer. He's radio voice of the Rangers. He does some other things like Knicks TV, and Mike Breen does national games. So I think that'd be weird if Kenny Albert was doing a Yankees playoff series. So I think they did this on purpose to have their better announcers for the Yankee series. And Bob Costas, by the way, game 1 on Friday night with Smoltz and Verducci and Rosenthal. And then Costas for game 3 of the Astros wildcard winner series. So Costas has both series for one game each for MLB Network. And then Fox Sports 1, Joe Davis for the Yankee series and Kenny Albert for the Astros series. And then Brian Anderson, Ron Darling, and Lauren Shahady for the Dodgers series, and Don Orsillo, Dennis Eckersley, and Hazel May for Braves Cardinals. So Ernie Johnson's getting the wild card game, and that's because of, obviously, Anderson. But then again, Anderson, if the Brewers win this game, then Anderson's going to have to call the Brewers series unless they flip him. So that's very strange that Brian Anderson's not calling tonight's game, because I think he called the NL wildcard game last year the AL wildcard game last year between the Athletics and the Yankees. So that's very strange. I think it's because it's the Brewers, so they obviously did not put Brian Anderson on. Meanwhile, they're going to get Brian Anderson if they win this game. So that's very strange by TBS there. So back to the prediction. So you got the Brewers, who I think should be very proud of the year that they had, closing the regular season so strong. They lose Christian Yelich to the broken kneecap. And then Nats, bad start, but a very strong final 3 months of the season. Brewers' offense without Yelich isn't terrible. Ryan Braun and Lorenzo Cain are injured, but they're going to be playing in this game because their season's on the line. And you have the rookie Keston Hiura, who's had a fine year, and then Mike Moustakas, who I think is one of the more streaky players in the league. Nationals offense is strong, led by your NL MVP finalist in my mind, Anthony Rendon, Juan Soto, Victor Robles, Trey Turner. The Brewers are sending out Brandon Woodruff on the mound to start, and it would not surprise me at all if he's in an opener situation, which would mean 2 innings, maybe 3 innings. If things go disastrously bad, 1 inning, and then they would go to the bullpen. Junior Guerrero, I think, would be the middle guy, and then you go to Brent Sutter, Drew Pomeranz, and then your closer, Josh Hader. Max Scherzer's getting the ball for Washington, obviously, and he hasn't been his dominant self in the second half because he was injured, but this is a big game. The Nationals had to do it with Scherzer. if you want to go down, you go down with your ace, and your ace is Max Scherzer. And Patrick Corbin, Steven Strasburg are guys that could be available out of the bullpen if needed, if Scherzer struggles. And both those guys are capable of getting the job done, too, in my mind, especially against a weak Brewers team. I don't know if I would trust Corbin against the Dodgers in the next round, assuming they get by this game. But Strasburg, somebody that I think's had moments in the playoffs. And then Corbin, obviously, when he was on the Diamondbacks, struggled in the playoffs. But I think this is a much weaker opponent than the Dodgers, obviously. Because, obviously, Diamondbacks-Dodgers was a series a few years ago, and Corbin struggled in that series. And then their normal bullpen isn't really dominant. Closer Sean Doodle's had his struggles. Fernando Rodney's in there. Daniel Hudson. Hunter Strickland are guys that have had streaks of good pitching. But the Nats bullpen is always a vulnerable unit come October. That said, Scherzer is the best pitcher that will be pitching in this game. The Nats have the better lineup, led by Rendon and Soto, and I believe they'll get the job done at home. So the prediction here, Nationals 6, Brewers 2. The over-under is 8. I'm not touching that. If it dropped to 7.5, I'll be all over on the over. So hopefully it drops to 7.5 before first pitch, or maybe it goes up to 8.5 and I bet the under. So maybe I'll get value wherever the public is going against. My pick for the American League wildcard game will be on tomorrow's podcast. NFL week number 5 power rankings. I'm going to go from 32 to 1 as I do each and every week. Number 32 is the Miami Dolphins. They're going to be number 32 the whole year. They're a cross-off. 31 is the Washington Redskins, also a cross-off. They're 0-4. By the way, Dolphins this upcoming week have a bye. Redskins this upcoming week have the Patriots at home, so they're in for another rude awakening. 30 Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's a cross-off team. They're 0-4. Next, they have the Cardinals at home. Number 29 is the New York Jets. No Sam Darnold. Maybe he's back against the Eagles this week. 28 is the Arizona Cardinals. Also winless 0-2-1 on the year. I have them as a cross-off as well as the Jets. Cardinals play at the Bengals this week. And then 27 is the Denver Broncos, who I have as a cross-off solely because they're 0-4. They're the best winless team in the league, and it's quite frankly not close because they probably should be 2-2 and not 0-4. They should have beaten the Bears, and they should have beaten the Jaguars last week. This week, they're at the Chargers. Number 26 is the New York Football Giants. I think this is the weakest 2-2 team in the league, although you could argue another team or two that I'm going to bring up in a couple of minutes. But to me, this is the weakest 2-2 team in the league. They didn't look that great in the second half against the Redskins. Their offense didn't do anything in the second half against the Redskins. I just think that maybe they're being conservative a little bit. They knew that they were going to win this game. So I guess you could use that as an excuse. But Daniel Jones, despite a couple picks, I thought played reasonably well again. And next up, I think Jones could be in a rude awakening when the Minnesota Vikings come to town on Sunday. 25 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They finally get their first win at home over the Bengals. This week they host the Ravens. 24 is the Atlanta Falcons. Just a dreadful loss at the hands of the Tennessee Titans. They go to Houston next week to play the Texans. 23 is the Tennessee Titans, who I mentioned. They got a win in Atlanta. I think this is a fraudulent 2-2. I don't believe in this team whatsoever. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they have a bye this week. No, they don't. They host the Bills. So, that's interesting. 22 is the Oakland Raiders, who had a nice win over the Indianapolis Colts in Indy. Next up, they have to go to London to face the Bears. Number 21 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2-2. This is another possible fraudulent 2-2. They had the nice win over the Rams in a game which they're dying to give away, especially Jameis Winston. So you could argue they're fraudulent 2-2, or you could argue they should be 3-1 if not for the missed kick by Matt Gay against the Giants. Next up, For the Bucs, they go to New Orleans to take on the Saints. Number 20 is the Jacksonville Jaguars. A nice win in Denver against the Broncos. They're now 2-2. I think this 2-2 is actually reasonable. Gardner Minshew has been serviceable. I'm not sure if he's going to keep this up, but you got to hand it to him for helping the Jaguars out, returning to 500. They're at the Panthers this week, and the Panthers are a number 19 team. Like I said, they host the Jaguars. Kyle Allen, like Minshew, has come in and kind of swung the Panthers season. The offense has been better with Allen, although it wasn't that good against the Texans the other day, and they come away with the win, led by their defense. 18 Indianapolis Colts, just a terrible loss against the Oakland Raiders. I think that Jacoby Brissett is overrated, and that game showed it. All those points were scored in garbage time. And the Colts this upcoming week are in for a rude awakening, in my opinion, as they have to go to Arrowhead to play the Chiefs. Number 17 is the Houston Texans, who are coming off a disappointing loss against the Panthers. They host the Falcons, who look like a team that's about to implode, on Sunday. 16 is the Detroit Lions. Nice performance against the Chiefs, but they fall short. And this upcoming week, it looks like they have a bye. Number 15 is the Buffalo Bills. Disappointing home loss against the Patriots. They had a chance to win that game, but Josh Allen got picked off late in that game, and he got hurt in that game as well. I think Allen will be fine. They're at the Titans next week. Number 14 is the San Francisco 49ers, coming off a bye. This upcoming week, they host the Browns and Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield on Monday Night Football. So, nice little showcase game for the 49ers to prove themselves for real in front of a national audience. Number 13 is the Minnesota Vikings, just a dreadful loss at the hands of the Bears. Kirk Cousins obviously flops yet again in a big spot. This upcoming week, they're at MetLife Stadium against the Giants in what I think is a get-right spot for Kirk Cousins in that offense. Number 12 is the Seattle Seahawks. A really nice win at Arizona against the Cardinals. Granted, the Cardinals are winless. The Seahawks next have to play the Rams on Thursday Night Football in what should be a very interesting game. Number 11, the Cleveland Browns, coming off a big-time win at the Ravens. Next up, they're on Monday Night Football against the 49ers. Number 10 is the New Orleans Saints. A nice win at home against the Cowboys. Their offense didn't do much. It was all defense and special teams in that game. I'm not a believer in Teddy Bridgewater. Next up for them, home against the Bucs. Number 9 is the Los Angeles Chargers. A get-right win at Miami. Next up, they host the Broncos. Number 8, the Baltimore Ravens. A very dismal loss at home against the Browns. They're at the Steelers next week. Number 7 is the Green Bay Packers. Disappointing home loss against the Eagles, but if Devontae Adams doesn't get hurt, maybe they win that game against Philly. Next up for them, at the Cowboys. 6, Chicago Bears. A very nice win against the Minnesota Vikings. Fans know Mitch Trubisky. Chase Daniels didn't have to do anything in that game. Bears defense won that game by themselves, and they can thank Kirk Cousins for that as well. Next up, they have to go to London to take on the Raiders. Number 5 is the Philadelphia Eagles. A really kick-ass, awesome win at the Packers on Thursday Night Football. They're back to 500. Next up for them, they host the Jets to get back above 500 on the year. 4 is the Rams. Just a dreadful loss against the Bucs. Jared Goff stunk in that game. It was the worst 500 passing yard game I've ever seen. He threw 3 interceptions, fumbled the ball at the end of the game. So you could argue he single-handedly lost them that game as well as their offense played in that game. Next up for them, they're at the Seahawks. 3 is the Dallas Cowboys. That was just, I think, a look-ahead trap game for the Cowboys. They were due for a stinker. And they ran into the Saints defense, which is among the best in the league. This Cowboys team I still think is very good. I think they have a chance to bounce back at home against the Packers this week in the 4:25 slot window with Buck and Aikman on the call. 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs. They probably should have lost the game to the Lions, but no, Patrick Mahomes worked his magic, and They came away with the win. Next up for them, they host the Colts in primetime. And number 1, the New England Patriots. They're going to be number 1 until further notice. A lot of people have the Chiefs ahead of them right now. I do not, because the Chiefs nearly lost to a fraudulent Lions team. So, I'm punishing the Chiefs just for a week from not putting them number 1. And New England went in, led by their defense, and handed the Bills their first loss. Pats' offense isn't that great. Their defense has really been their calling card, so you could argue that Brady's starting to show his age a little bit. And get right spot for Tom Brady, by the way, next week as they go to Washington. All right. Guess the lines. Week number 5. All right. First up, Thursday Night Football, you have the Rams at the Seahawks. I had Rams as a 3-point favorite. They're getting a 1.5. So I think that's an overreaction to Jared Goff's bad game and an overreaction to the Seahawks getting a win against a bad Cardinals team. Sunday, you have Cardinals-Bengals. This is the worst game of the week, in my opinion. Bengals are a 3-point favorite. Oh, I have them as a 3-point favorite. They're favored by 3.5. The Bills at the Titans. I have the Bills by 2.5. It's Titans by 3. I think the wrong team is favored in that game. Bears versus the Raiders in London. I went a little high. It's probably because I forgot that Mitch Trubisky was hurt and the fact that I still think the Raiders stink. And I have Bears by 7.5. It's 4.5. So that's a weird line. Buccaneers at the Saints. I have the Saints by 6.5. Saints by 3.5. I just thought that Vegas was going to overvalue New Orleans, and I still head scratching about Tampa a little bit. Vikings at the Giants. I have Vikings by 7.5. It's 5.5 after it was 4.5 the other day. It actually opened at 5.5, went down to 4.5, went back up to 5.5. So 2 points off on Vikings Giants. Jets at the Eagles. I have Eagles by 16.5. It's Eagles by 14. That line probably drops to 12 if Sam Darnold plays. Ravens at the Steelers. I have Ravens by 2.5. It's Ravens by 3.5. Patriots at the Redskins. I have Pats by 18. It's Pats by 15.5. Jaguars at the Panthers. I have Panthers by 4. It's Panthers by 3.5. Falcons at the Texans. I have Texans by 3.5. It's 5. Broncos at the Chargers. I have Chargers by 9.5. It's 6.5. Packers host the Cowboys. I have Cowboys by 3.5, and that's what the line is. Colts at the Chiefs. I have the Chiefs by 10.5, and it is 10.5. So another correct pick there. And then the Browns at the 49ers. I have the Browns as a 1.5 road favorite, and they're actually getting 3.5 against the unbeaten 49ers. I almost said winless 49ers. So the unbeaten 49ers are giving 3.5 at home against Odell and company. So there you have it. 15 games. You have the Thursday night game, 10 1 o'clock games, 2 late games, Sunday night, Monday night. I got 2 lines correct, Packers, Cowboys, and Colts, Chiefs. Best bet of the day brought to you by DraftKings. This is simple. Just take the Nats. And not only do I love the Nats, I love them on the run line. Plus 1.5. The value, last I got it at, was plus 112. So I would wager $1 on the Nats run line. It's plus 110 right now. Wagering $1 pays out $2.10. That's it for the podcast today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping the National League wildcard game. We'll preview and pick the American League wildcard game. College bowl projections tomorrow. Best bet. And then we'll recap Game 2 of the WNBA Finals. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.